Hello, and welcome to a short box from Warhammer 40k's Grim History from the Beyond. I'm Zeckthar, and for the next few weeks, we'll be covering the Siege of Medusa. Now last week, we covered the start of the siege, as well as discussing what the Tau wanted, as well as the Necrons. This week, we will cover what the Eldar wanted, as well as the Tyranids, and in conclusion, the Orks. Now the Drukari... Okay, I gotta stop right there for a second. I have to preference this with who the Drukari are. The Drukari are very similar to Terran 42's fantasy race known as the Drow, or Dark Elves. Yet they are at their best, the worst of what the Drow are. On a good day. They are by far the worst race in the galaxy. They are a sneaky group that live only to torture and kill anything that is not Drukari. Actually, that's not right. They live only to torture and kill everyone, including their own. If it was a choice between them and a seasick crocodile, well, I'd pick the seasick crocodile. Sorry, I just really hate these guys. Anywho, shipping in the region of the Medusa system had experienced a severe increase in pirate attacks over the months before the conflict fought on the world. Although the Imperial patrol fleets posted to guard the Medusa system made strenuous efforts to prevent the rising shipping losses in transports and cargo vessels, they had very little success. The fleet commanders and ship captains did not know it, but the reason for their failure was an exceptional skills and leadership of a single individual, Noakai, daughter of pain. Once the handmaiden of Asdrubal Vecht, Noakai was amongst the most powerful Dark Eldar in all of Camarach, and Asdrubal's personal protector. It is common knowledge in the Dark City that Noakai had fallen out of favor with her master, and though no one knew exactly what had taken place between them, Noakai swiftly found herself exiled from Vecht's palaces and banished from Camarach, which, I might add, meant that the daughter of pain hadn't really pissed off Vecht, for if she had, to the torture pits she would have gone. Yet far from laying her low, Noakai's exile seemed to have hardened her resolve. Dark Eldar warriors flocked to join her raiding force as she secured victory after victory. 1,000 Tau were enslaved in a single day, plucked from their colony world under the cover of darkness. A dozen Imperial transports were gutted by her elite warriors, as thousands of human settlers were dragged screaming to their doom by Drukari boarding parties. Wherever she tread, horrid glory abounded, and her raiding force grew daily as more Dark Eldar cabals swore allegiance to her. For many Drukari, leadership of a dozen warships and the support of dozens of cabals would have been satisfactory enough. But not Noakai. She thirsted for more. Her jealousy of Vecht's power drove her onwards. The shame of her banishment burned like an inner fire, and she hungered for the day when she could cast down the Lord of the Blackheart Cabal and seize his power over Camarach for her own. The Archons and the Drakons that sided with her recognized a chance to earn great glory and power. If their gambit succeeded, there would be enough rewards for all. To achieve her aims, Noakai needed slaves by the millions for her triumphal return to Camarach. Enough souls to bribe those who would otherwise remain loyal to Vecht. If she was to succeed, Noakai needed fodder to fuel the greatest coup in the history of the Dark Eldar. With malice in her heart, the daughter of pain led her raiding force to the embattled surface of Medusa V, ready to slaughter and enslave all who stood in her way. Ultimately, all battles won by the Dark Eldar on Medusa V enslaved more of the populace of the planet, winning glory for Noakai and her allies and enhancing their plans to seize control of Camarach. Just to say, not a fun person. But what are the Drukari's distant cousins, the Aeldari? Well, as usual, it's not so simple as a vast slaving party. The Aeldari have always been a complicated race. If Medusa V had been a normal Imperial world that faced mortal danger, the obtuse Eldar would no more have cared about its fate than that of the hive of insects. But, as with many strategically placed habitable worlds across the galaxy, Medusa V harbored a portal into the webway through which the mysterious Eldar traveled through the galaxy. No one save the Guardians of the Black Library knew the true extent of the Eldar's labyrinthine dimension. It connected every one of the craft worlds and 1,000 other locations, riddling the galaxy like the great circulatory system of their long-lost interstellar empire. In its prime, it enabled the Eldar to traverse great distances through the warp in complete safety. But theirs is a fallen empire, and the webway is now splintered and broken. The jagged spur of the webway jutting onto Medusa V is permanently open, and just as the Eldar can spill out without warning, the forces of chaos can also spill in. Now, we covered a little bit of this in our Vox, The Ruinous Powers of Chaos. Feel free to check it out, but to give you the bullet points, the Eldari succumb to extremes of experience. Their senses so finely attuned they perceive the heights and depths of agony and ecstasy. Throughout a long period of decline, the intensity of emotion generated by the Eldari's excess began to coalesce within the Immaterium. A new chaos power was being formed, growing stronger with every indulgence. This entity dozed fitfully, its dreams fed by the Eldari's deeds. These dreams leaked back into the Eldari psyche, and the race plunged into further extremes. In time, the Eldari people sank to the lowest depths of depravity, and the sleeping power awoke. The chaos god Slanesh was born, and its birth cries decimated the race, drawing the spirits of billions of Eldari into the warp to be consumed by the newborn god. The worst destruction occurred at the heart of the galaxy-spanning empire, where the warp erupted into real space. An area almost 20,000 light-years across was engulfed in the very stuff of chaos, known today as the Eye of Terror. But what does this have to do with Medusa V? Well, the Eldar sought to prevent the warp from running unchecked upon Medusa V, lest it bleed into the webway and pollute their territory. Craftworld Alaitok and several other Eldar craft worlds were potentially in great peril if Medusa V fell to chaos, and its farseers foretold of a plague of demons that would riddle its infinity circuit should the forces of darkness triumph in their conquest. Autarch Alaric Swiftblade of Alaitok was determined to seal off the portal before the webway disintegrated under the force of the warp storm. She marshaled forces from a dozen craft worlds, in the grim knowledge that she must ensure the ritual to seal the webway proceeded undisturbed at all costs. Only those closest to her knew that her nemesis, the Black Legion's Gethmor, the Deceiver, had arrived on Medusa V, and that her enmity towards the twisted chaos sorcerer was so strong that she might gamble the fate of her craft world for the chance at revenge. Ultimately, an Eldar victory on Medusa V would have ensured that the webway gates were sealed, preserving the Eldar craft world from the possible chaos invasion. Well, now that we know what the elves, the Eldar are up to, what about the Tyranids? In the dark reaches of the night, the frightened citizens of Medusa V whispered stories of a murderous ghost that stalked the underhives of the world's greatest hive cities. Each Medusan hive had its own legend, its own tales of sudden and unexpected slaughter. Though the details differed, they all described the same beast, a killing machine that appeared out of nowhere, ripping its victims into bloody tatters and then disappearing into thin air. It became known as Death Leaper, for those who had seen it kill and survived to tell the tale described it as a violent elemental force that pounced from the shadows. But it was no myth. If the Underhivers had known the truth about the alien presence among them, they would have realized that the true nightmare was only about to begin. The Tyranid splinter fleet of Hive Fleet Kraken that cast its shadow unexpectedly over Medusa V had evolved in the crucible of constant warfare. Its component species had adapted for fighting in dense urban environments, and none more so than the vanguard Tyranid organisms that were first seated upon the beleaguered world of Medusa V. Death Leaper was one of these breeds. Not a single entity, but a strain of Tyranid lictors, called the Death Leaper genus by the Inquisition, that had evolved chameleonic abilities so advanced, these killers had become all but invisible. Given the kill patterns, there was at least one Death Leaper lictor per hive city on Medusa V. These creatures had alerted their parent bioships to the rich amounts of biomass presented on Medusa V, and the Splinter Fleet had arrived in the Medusa system like a hive of locusts to scour it clean. Simply put, the Tyranids came to Medusa V to do what they always do, to feed. Now, mark my words, folks. The Tyranids are the virus of the Milky Way system, slowly trying to consume all within it. But they would face rough odds on Medusa V, especially because of the last force we are about to discuss today, the bacteria of the Milky Way, so to speak. In this dark time, the Medusa system, once an oasis of stability for humanity, became a treacherous place, a fact many spacefarers discovered to their cost, as a force of Reavers unleashed a vicious campaign of piracy in the system's vicinity. System augurs detected the presence of something so large that it could only be an Ork space hulk moving through the warp, and Pitt, captured from reconnaissance flights, finally revealed the truth after it emerged into real space. Adorned with a dog-tooth pattern and distinctive Ork glyph, the hulk was identified as the Cilia, belonging to the Ork warlord Nazdreg Urdgrub. Now, for those of you who don't know who this is, feel free to listen to our Vox, the Orks' greatest champions. Anyways, after his unlikely alliance with Gazkul Thraka during the Third War of Armageddon was broken and their combined forces were defeated in the Presina system, Nazdreg had been presumed dead by the Imperium. Unfortunately, the infamous Ork warlord returned to plague the Imperium once more. Though alerted to this threat, system defense ships were unable to halt the advance of Nazdreg's space hulk, eventually losing it in the chaos of the orbital battles surrounding Medusa V. Now, it should speak volumes for the anarchy engulfing the planet that at this time, the impact of an object the size of a space hulk north of the hive city Ctesiphon along the Charybdis crest did not register among the world's authorities. But any hopes that the Orks had died in the crash were soon dashed. Within days, scores of farming communities were razed as Nazdreg led his warriors on a new war against the Imperium. Attempts by the planetary defense forces to quash the Greenskins failed, and Nazdreg's assault grew in size as more of his warriors rampaged from the crashed space hulk. Soon, the Mad Boys began acting more strangely than usual, renting that Medusa V, and everything on it, was soon to be destroyed. Only when the weird boys confirmed that something nasty was indeed coming from the warp did Nazdreg decide that it was time to take his warriors someplace else in search of an even bigger fight. In order to do so, though, the Orks' space hulk needed to be repaired. The Orks stripped the human settlements they had destroyed of every scrap of machinery and metal they could find. After each battle, the Orks dragged the still smoking machinery back to the hulk for the mechs to bolt into its side. The Orks had come to Medusa V, and even though they did not plan to hang around for its destruction, they had no intent of leaving before they had enjoyed a good crumpin'. Every Ork victory brought more scrap metal and technology for Nazdreg's space hulk Cilia, so the Ork boys could rebuild their ship and carry their warg to new territories. Well, folks, that's all the time we have for today. But what happened to all these races? Well, after I explain everyone's tactical schemes and marching orders, I will give said answer in a grand finale. Now, won't you join us next week as we discuss the Imperium and Chaos? Until then, I hope you enjoyed this Vox, and if you did, please like, follow, comment, and subscribe. And if you really enjoyed the show, feel free to join our membership program on our Spotify channel and YouTube channel called Tales of Asharaka. Have a great day, and as always, until next time, this is Zeckthar, signing off.